Alright, so first things first, this really big, if you're looking in the score, you'll see it, this really big block of performance text at the very beginning that I will read out in full. Now, in the passages marked free time between the sign this and the next bar line, the band leader should slightly vary his beat lengths with that rhythmic elasticity so characteristic of many English folk singers, and especially characteristic of George Ray, the singer of this song. Thus, the opening phrase may be taken like this, or like this. We're not going to be looking at those notated rhythms today, because Graham really takes it and does his own thing. Varying, that's not important. The band leader should give free rein to his rhythmic fancy, just as folk singers do. Each note with an arrow above it may be beaten with a downbeat. Regular beat lengths and conventional beat gestures are taken up wherever there are bar lines and time signatures, which I will talk about when we get to them. But first things first, let's go to my notes and let's talk about the first fanfare section, which is the first open meter section. Notice in that recording how Graham holds on to that first note, grounding the rest of this introduction section. It lets you feel the sound of the brass of the ensemble, because it is only brass. Lets you feel the sound of the ensemble, how they play. It gives you that dynamic grounding so you know what loud is for them, because this is kind of a tidbit in especially wind band music, but loud is only loud if you have something quiet to balance it out. You can't just be loud all the time. Next note, Graham exaggerates the natural accelerando in this first strand, which I'm going to say strand a lot. It's the areas that are cut off by the breath marks in these open meter fanfare sections. Graham exaggerates this natural crescendo, starting especially at the first eighth note and really picking up in the dotted triplet section. So this first strand starts fairly slow. Again, the slowness is exaggerated with the kind of non-willingness to let go of that first note. Graham really wants to hold on to that first chord. So it starts off very sluggish and speeds right up to that first half note. Also notice how the tubas and baritones play the note leading into the triplets with the same articulation and dynamic feel of the notes in the triplets, kind of forcing the rest of the ensemble into its colorful rhythmic contrast that it has, again speeding up into that very triumphant half note. This first breath mark shows off how Graham treats all the rest, almost like a half shashura. It gives just enough room for the listener to get in a half breath before the powerful chords suck you back into this battlefield that is painted with this war song. So let's go ahead and listen to that first strand again. The color changes in this second strand as the harmony drops and the phrases get longer and slower as Graham slows the tempo this time in contrast to the speeding up he did at first. The breath mark rest is also shorter this time, but leads into a longer hold of the first chord of the third strand, which again brightens the mood on this uplifting, sharpened 2 chord. So let's listen to this second strand. The triplet movement returns, and I lost my spot. The triplet movement returns and brings in a accelerando once more, leading into a shortened stinger chord which is the 16th note before the half note. That gives a dancey and lively feel synonymous with Grainger's composition style. So let's listen to the third strand, which is rehearsal A if you have the score with you. In this final strand, the first three chords borrowed directly from the second strand, naturally closing the introduction in our mind by bringing back that familiar theme. It also slows down and plays a very interesting variation on the dotted triplet rhythm that has already been shown to us twice in just the first couple seconds of this movement, leading the listener to question the choice before boldly ending on the resolving chord with the mediant of the key center shouted out by unison horns. This is all bolstered by a swelling timpani roll the very first non-brass instrument, ending at the climax of the dynamic shift when the half note cuts off. This leads us right into the slow section. And this slow section finally gives us time signatures, but in classic Grainger fashion, it shifts nearly every bar, giving a lopsided, almost drunken feel. One could say this imitates soldiers drinking before and in between battles. Solo trumpet takes the lead in this slow section, continuing it as the lead metallic voice that persists throughout this entire introduction of the movement. Saxes also join in here, cutting off this slow diversion even more by introducing woodwinds. But a stark, almost playful anacrusis holds out on the very last note, held out by a very short fermata, before Graham immediately takes us back to the battlefield with a variation on the first strand of the first fanfare in the second fanfare. And that leads us, of course, to the second fanfare, which only has one note. This variation changes at the pickup into the triplet section, with chromatically descending parallel low brass chords, ending on a very, very satisfying major seventh. God, I just love that. And that primes us to go right into this very heroic trumpet call section. Octave trumpets blare out an incredibly slow variation on the second strand theme, with the rest of the brass section returning fire with staccato chords on the upbeats of back-to-back 2/4 and 4/4 measures, grounding the downbeats for a very short period. It's quickly taken over by a measure of 5/4 that starts with lush, climbing chords beginning on beat 2 and becoming chromatic on beat 4. The introduction to Lord Melbourne ends in a full brass chord with horns bleeding the subdominant once again, holding out over timpani the interesting side drum and bass drum rolls in unison. So, that's the introduction to Lord Melbourne, and once again, I'll let you listen to that section. Such a great introduction to this very militaristic movement with this beautiful folk song in the background and this beautiful, beautiful interpretation by Graham. There's so much life in every single note, especially in that introduction section, because of the freedom that Grainger gave the conductor. The use of brass is it's unbeatable here. The voicing and the orchestration with this huge choir and these dense parts, sometimes splitting into, I'm counting now, a ridiculous amount of voices. Even the condensed score had to be fit on 3 staves, not to mention the percussion parts that come in, of course, sparsely, but all very, very well placed. I hope that listening to this will, first of all, if you listen to this, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned more. Maybe if you haven't heard this piece before, I'm glad you discovered it. And I very much encourage you to listen to the whole thing. The whole piece is wonderful. Super dense harmony, interesting rhythms, classic Grainger at work here. And if you have any more suggestions, I would be glad to do this again with maybe other pieces, or maybe do Lincolnshire Posy in its entirety. But yeah, anything you would like, comment it, and I'd get to work on it. See ya next time, and all that good stuff. Enjoy the rest of your day, or the rest of your afternoon, or the rest of your evening, or the rest of your night. Or if you're about to go to bed, hope you enjoy tomorrow. Yada yada yada. I feel like I need to sign off, but I don't know anything because this is my first episode. Make sure to drink enough water. That's just for real. Drink water.